My name is Collins Fairmont, 34 years old. For the last 11 years, every time I walked into that house, someone found a way to remind me I was the family's biggest embarrassment, the one who still digs through trash for a living. This Christmas Eve was supposed to be no different. Halfway through dinner, my younger brother leaned back in his chair, smirked, and said loud enough for the whole table to hear, "Still picking through garbage to pay rent, huh, sis?" The room exploded with laughter. My parents both sighed at the same time, shaking their heads. Such an embarrassment to the family. I didn't answer. I just raised my glass and took a slow sip of the Cabernet. That's when the 85-inch TV on the wall cut from carols to a breaking news alert. The CNBC anchor's voice boomed through the speakers. Tonight, Forbes exclusively reveals the identity of the mysterious CEO behind the $9 billion sustainable luxury empire. Personal net worth $2.7 billion. Collins Fairmont. Dead silence. The wine glass slipped straight from my brother's hand, shattered on the marble red, splashing everywhere like blood. He stared at the screen, mouth open, finally managed to whisper, "What the hell?" If you want to know exactly what I said when I finally opened my mouth, and how that night ended every tie with the people who laughed at me, stay until the end. Hit the like button now so you don't miss what comes next, and let's get into it. The first time I realized money could buy everything except belief, I was 8 years old and hiding under the grand piano in the formal living room, while the adults toasted another oil lease. Our house sat on the biggest lot on Beverly Drive in Highland Park, Dallas. The one with the limestone facade, the motor court that could swallow 6 cars without blinking, and the kind of manicured lawn that required 3 full-time groundskeepers just to keep it television ready. Father, Harrington Fairmont, ran the family office that had been managing mineral rights and commercial real estate since Texas was still a republic. Mother, Gwendolyn Fairmont, spent her days chairing the Crystal Charity Ball Committee and making sure every society page photo showed her on the right side of the right people. And then there was Weston. From the moment he came home from the hospital, Weston was the heir, the future, the living proof the Fairmont name would keep shining. He got the imported English rocking horse before he could sit up. He got the junior-size Bentley electric car at 4. When he decided at 7 that he wanted to play hockey, a sport nobody in Texas even understood. Father had a regulation ice rink built behind the stables. Every report card, every trophy, every minor accomplishment was treated like the second coming. The staff literally clapped when he walked into a room. I was the accident they never planned for. Mother spelled it out the summer I turned 16 poolside at the Dallas Country Club between sips of her second mimosa. SMU, the right sorority, then marry someone whose family already owned half of North Park Center, or a chunk of DFW Airport. That was the blueprint. Law school or an MBA was optional. Producing the next generation of Fairmonts was not. I had other plans. I spent every free hour in the old sewing room on the 3rd floor, surrounded by bolts of discarded couture fabric the Neiman Marcus alterations department was going to throw away. I took apart vintage Halston gowns just to study how the bias was cut. I taught myself pattern making from library books. When we went to New York for the ballet, I slipped away to the garment district and begged sample room scraps off the cutting room floors. By 17, I was hoarding every birthday and Christmas check to buy deadstock silk that had been declared imperfect by the mills in Como. Grandma Ellie, Eleanor Fairmont, was the only person who ever saw me. She caught me once at 3 a.m, pins between my teeth, trying to turn a rejected length of Loro Piana cashmere into a coat. Instead of scolding me for ruining $1,000 fabric, she lowered herself onto the floor, handed me a cup of coffee, and studied the muslin I was draping on the dress form. After a long silence, she said, "You've got an eye most designers would sell their soul for. Don't let this house talk you out of it." She was the only one who ever said anything like that. When the RISD acceptance letter came, full merit scholarship, no legacy strings, Father laughed so hard he had to sit down. Mother told the junior league I was exploring alternative education options. Weston already accepted to UT Austin on a legacy slot he never needed. Told his fraternity brothers his weird sister was moving to Rhode Island to freeze her ass off and play with garbage. Second year, I called home from Providence. I told them I wasn't coming back for Thanksgiving or Christmas or any holiday ever again if they couldn't accept what I wanted to do with my life. Father's exact response loud enough for the whole kitchen staff to hear. Then you're on your own, Collins. Completely. Mother managed theatrical tears for exactly 28 seconds before she booked a mother-son ski week in Telluride with Weston. Grandma Ellie waited until everyone else had stormed out. Then she took the phone voice steady and said, "Go build something the world can't look away from. I believe in you more than I've ever believed in anything this family ever did." That was the last conversation I had with any of them for the next 11 years. 1 week after Grandma Ellie hung up the phone with those final words of belief, Father followed through. Every account bearing my name went dark overnight. Debit cards declined at the campus coffee shop, trust fund transfers reversed, even the emergency credit line Mother kept for shopping emergencies was canceled without a courtesy call. I had $800 in crumpled 20s and 50s I'd saved from random styling gigs and selling old clothes on Poshmark. That was it. I walked into TF Green Airport in Providence, bought the cheapest one-way ticket to New York, and boarded a flight that smelled like wet dog and disappointment. Middle seat, crying baby behind me, guy on the aisle eating boiled eggs from a Ziploc. I stared out the window the entire time and didn't cry once. I landed at LaGuardia with one battered Rimowa and no plan. Bushwick, Brooklyn, late 2014. I found a fourth-floor walk-up studio on Weirfield Street between Wyckoff and Irving. 400 square feet, one window facing a brick wall radiator that sounded like it was dying every time it kicked on, and a bathroom down the hall I shared with 3 guys who played death metal at 3 a.m. Rent was $900 a month. I paid first, last, and security with everything I had left, then slept on the bare floor for the first 3 weeks because I couldn't afford even an IKEA futon. The very next morning, I was on the J train before sunrise, riding into the garment district. I started hanging around the loading docks on West 38th and 39th, waiting for the big houses to dump their cutting room waste. At first, the guys thought I was some rich kid playing artist. After I showed up every single day for 2 weeks, rain or freezing wind, they started saving the good bins for me. Leftover Loro Piana, cashmere rejected lengths of double-faced wool from Italian Mills silk faille that had one tiny flaw nobody else would ever notice. They wrote C in Sharpie on the bags, so nobody else grabbed them. I dragged those bags home on the subway arms, aching, smelling like chemicals and dye. Back in the studio, I sorted everything under the one bare bulb hanging from the ceiling, labeled by fiber, by weight, by hand feel. My cutting table was 2 sawhorses and a warped sheet of plywood I found on the curb. My sewing machine was a 1974 Singer I bought from a lady in Crown Heights for $40 cash and a promise to teach her granddaughter how to hem jeans. The first piece I ever finished was a structured tote made from midnight blue Loro Piana coating that had been rejected for a single pulled thread lined with leftover Hermes silk twill in hunter green. 48 hours of hand-stitching, no pattern, just muscle memory and obsession. When it was done, I carried it up to the roof at magic hour and shot it with my cracked iPhone 5 against the skyline. Caption: one person's trash. I posted it to a brand new Instagram account I called C-Lux. 24 hours later, the post had 12,000 likes and a direct message from a partner at a women-led venture fund in Soho. She wanted to meet that week. We sat in a tiny cafe on Lafayette. She asked where I saw the brand in 5 years. I told her I didn't have a 5-year plan. I just knew I could make people fight to own objects that had been headed for a landfill. She slid a term sheet across the table, $500,000 pre-seed for 15%, one condition. My full name never appears on anything. Mystery is the ultimate luxury, she said. I signed C in black ink and never looked back. The next 7 years were pure controlled chaos. I moved production to a loft in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, hired seamstresses who had been laid off when the last American couture houses closed, built an entire supply chain out of fabric that luxury brands had written off. Every drop sold out in minutes. Vogue ran a blind item about the ghost label rewriting sustainable luxury. Bergdorf begged for an exclusive. Celebrities wore the pieces on red carpets and told interviewers they had a friend who made them. I still lived in the same 400-square-foot studio until the company could afford real offices. I still rode the subway. I still kept my full name off every single label contract and caption. 11 years after I left Texas with $800 and a suitcase, the company had become something so enormous that even the people who once called me a failure would never in a million years believe it was mine. I had sworn to myself I would never again spend Christmas Eve in that house. For 11 consecutive years I stayed in New York, ordered dumplings from the same place on Mott Street, poured a single glass of champagne at midnight, and toasted to another year of freedom. It was quiet. It was mine. Then, exactly 21 days ago, the private line in my penthouse rang at 7 in the morning. Only one person on earth still had that number. "Collins Sugar," Grandma Ellie said, voice soft, as the cashmere she used to wrap me in when I was small. "I'm 82, and the good Lord hasn't sent me an exact expiration date. I don't aim to sit through another one of these dinners without my granddaughter beside me. Come home. Just this once." For an old woman who's running out of Christmases, I rattled off every excuse I'd perfected year-end inventory in Paris investors from Milan, the usual armor. She listened without interrupting, then said simply, "I'll leave the porch light on. The same one that's been waiting since you were 17. That was all it took. So on December 24th, I landed at Love Field, chose the plainest gray Camry in the Hertz lot, so no one could sneer at an Uber pulling up to the gates, and changed in the airport family restroom into the simplest black cashmere dress I owned, 6 years old. No visible label, nothing they could weaponize. I looked like someone who had nothing left to prove. Perfect. The main house hadn't aged a day. A 30-foot Norwegian spruce imported from Vermont 3 weeks earlier stood in the great room like a silent monarch, decorated exclusively in white Phalaenopsis orchids, flown in daily from Thailand, and hand-blown crystal drops that cost more than most new luxury sedans. The 1928 mahogany dining table stretched 40 feet and seated 24. Baccarat crystal reflected the firelight. Sterling flatware gleamed, place cards were written in Mother's flawless copperplate. The 1884 Chateau Lafite had been decanting since noon, and the same string quartet, now in their third generation, played the exact sacred playlist they had used since I was 9. Weston and Spencer were seated directly across from me. He wore midnight blue velvet with satin peak lapels sharp enough to cut glass. She wore a backless liquid red sequin column that probably had its own insurance rider and screamed "Ring by Spring." Their engagement had been announced in October with a sponsored shoot in Aspen, and tonight they glowed like the tree itself belonged to them. First-course chilled lobster medallions with Osetra caviar had barely been served when Spencer tilted her head, smile glittering brighter than the chandelier. "That dress is very," understated Collins. "Still shopping the Neiman's last call clearance rack." I see Weston barked a laugh loud enough to make the quartet miss half a beat. A few cousins hid smirks behind monogrammed napkins. I tasted nothing. Second course seared foie gras with fig mostarda. Weston dabbed his mouth with the linen, leaned forward, and spoke loud enough for the children's table to hear. "So remind us again, what exactly do you do in New York these days, still diving into dumpsters behind fabric houses looking for scraps to sew together?" Laughter rolled down both sides of the table like dominoes. One of Mother's charity circle friends actually fanned herself with delight. Spencer leaned in, voice dripping honey and acid. I mean, honestly, how do you even pay rent picking through garbage? Do you have a secret Etsy store we should all be supporting? The room exploded. Someone at the far end repeated Etsy and dissolved into giggles. Third course Wagyu filet with black truffle bordelaise. Spencer tapped her blood-red nails on the crystal stem. 34 years old and still scavenging trash for a living. That has to be some kind of world record. Weston raised his glass in mock salute, grinning like he'd just closed the biggest deal of the year. Father set his knife and fork down with the slow, deliberate precision he used before firing a CEO. Mother mirrored the gesture perfectly. They looked at each other, then at me, and sighed in perfect, practiced unison. Such an embarrassment to the family. The words settled over the table like a cold front. Grandma Ellie sat to my immediate right. 82 spine straight as ever, silver hair swept into its usual low chignon, wearing the same single strand of pearls she'd owned since Truman was president. She hadn't touched her wine once. Halfway through the main course, her small warm hand slipped under the heavy damask tablecloth and closed around mine. She squeezed once, firm, steady, certain, and never let go for the rest of the night. Their verdict was still hanging in the air when the 85-inch screen woke up on its own. The sacred string quartet cut to dead silence. The CNBC breaking news banner flashed blood red across the bottom third. The anchor's voice, calm, professional, and impossibly loud, filled every corner of the great room. Good evening. We interrupt your holiday programming with breaking news out of New York. Forbes is exclusively revealing tonight the identity of the mysterious C, the reclusive founder who built the $9 billion sustainable luxury empire that has dominated fashion for the past decade. Sources confirm the majority owner and creative force behind the most coveted brand on the planet is none other than Dallas native Collins Fairmont, with a personal net worth estimated at $2.7 billion. My official portrait shot 2 weeks ago outside the Navy Yard headquarters replaced the anchor in full 8K clarity. Black cashmere coat arms crossed Manhattan's skyline behind me, no smile. The first sound was crystal exploding. Weston's Bordeaux glass slipped straight from his fingers and hit the Italian marble with a crack that echoed like a gunshot. Shards skittered under chairs and tables. The deep red wine spread across the 19th century Persian rug in a widening stain that looked exactly like fresh blood under the chandelier's glare. He didn't bend to pick it up. He just stared at the screen face draining of color so fast the red sequins on Spencer's dress suddenly looked garish against his pallor. Spencer's manicured hand flew to her throat as if someone had choked her. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. Nothing came out. Father's fork froze halfway to his mouth. A bead of truffle sauce trembled on the silver tines. Mother's wine glass shook so violently a drop splashed onto the pristine white tablecloth blooming crimson. One of the teenage cousins actually whispered, "Holy shit," before an aunt elbowed him silent. The anchor continued without mercy. For 11 years, the industry has chased the ghost known only as C. Tonight, we can confirm Collins Fairmont built the entire empire from couture. Waste headed for landfills, turned it into the most exclusive luxury house in the world, and did it all while remaining completely anonymous. The company is now valued at $9 billion with Ms. Fairmont retaining majority ownership. Another photograph flashed me on the cover of the new Forbes issue, arms crossed headline, screaming in bold white letters, "The $2.7 billion secret." The string quartet had stopped breathing. The caterers froze, mid-step silver trays suspended in air. Weston finally found his voice. It came out cracked and small. That's not real. It can't be." Spencer tried to laugh, some desperate, strangled sound that died in her throat. "You're telling me? Collins, our Collins. This is a joke. Someone hacked the TV." Father's face had gone the color of printer paper. His lips moved, but no sound emerged. Mother's eyes darted from the screen to me and back again, as if the numbers refused to compute in her brain. The anchor kept going. Industry insiders are calling tonight's reveal the biggest unmasking in fashion since Yves Saint Laurent took over Dior. Fairmont's pieces have been worn by every major celebrity from Beyoncé to Kate Blanchett, all while the designer herself remained a complete mystery. We'll have reaction from Wall Street and 7th Avenue after this. The screen cut to commercial, but the room stayed frozen. 24 people sat in absolute suffocating silence, while broken crystal glittered on the floor and the red wine kept spreading like an accusation. Grandma Ellie was the only soul at the table whose expression had changed at all. She turned to me slowly, eyes shining with tears she refused to let fall, and gave the smallest, proudest, most radiant smile I had ever seen in my life. I set my glass down very carefully and finally spoke. I pushed my chair back slowly. The legs dragged across the 200-year-old oak floor with a long, deliberate screech that silenced every last cough and clink. I rose to my full height, smoothed the black cashmere that 5 minutes earlier had been mocked as clearance rack, and looked around the table one last time. 11 years of swallowed words rose in my throat like champagne finally uncorked. 11 years, I said, voice perfectly level, perfectly audible. 11 years of being the family cautionary tale. Year 1, she'll be back by February. Year 2, still playing with trash, how precious. Year 3, she's an embarrassment. Year 4 through 11, the same joke, just with older Bordeaux and louder laughs. I turned to father first. You froze every account the week I left RISD, told the club I was finding myself. Let people whisper I was on drugs in a cult, anything except building something you couldn't control. Then mother. You rewrote the story so elegantly. Collins is taking an extended sabbatical. Smiled while your friends pitied you for the daughter who refused to marry oil money. Then Weston. And you made a career out of it. Every Thanksgiving, every Derby party, every time you needed to look tall, you stood on my back. My sister, the trash picker. Tonight, you delivered the punchline perfectly. Spencer tried to disappear into her sequins, but I wasn't done. You laughed the hardest, Spencer. Congratulations. You win the table. I let the silence stretch until it became painful. The company you just saw on television is valued at $9 billion. My personal net worth is $2.7 billion. Every cent came from fabric the industry threw away, and a signature I kept as a single letter so none of you could ever take credit or destroy it. Father tried first. Collins honey. Nor one syllable, ice cold. I don't want apologies. I don't want sudden pride. I don't want a single rewritten memory where you claim you always believed. I turned to the only person who had never needed rewriting. Grandma Ellie, for 11 years you sent a handwritten letter every single month. You never asked for proof, never demanded photos, never once wavered. You are the only reason the word family still means something to me. Her eyes filled instantly, but the smile that broke across her face was brighter than the chandelier. I looked back at the 4 people who had spent a decade sharpening their knives on my spine. Tonight, the Fairmont family has exactly 5 members at this table. As of this second, I am no longer one of them. My shares in the family office will be liquidated next week. My name is removed from every trust, every board, every Christmas card list forever. Consider this my immediate and permanent resignation from the bloodline. Weston tried again, voice cracking like cheap crystal. Sis, come on, you don't mean I looked him dead in the eye. Picking through trash paid $2.7 billion. Tell me, little brother, how much did ass-kissing pay you this year? Spencer actually gasped and clutched her throat. Father shot to his feet so fast his chair toppled backward with a crash. Mother started sobbing, real tears this time, not the practiced ones. I didn't wait for the rest of the performance. I walked around the table, knelt in front of Grandma Ellie, and wrapped my arms around her small, strong frame. She held me so tightly I felt every year of love she had saved for this exact moment. I'm taking you home with me, I whispered against her silver hair. Real home. Tonight. She nodded once, tears finally falling. I stood, took her hand in mine, and walked out of the dining room without another glance at the spilled wine, the broken glass, or the 4 people still frozen in their seats. The porch light she promised was still burning when we stepped outside into the Texas night. 4 months later, the fallout had finished its work. Weston survived exactly 72 days in the family office after Christmas. The first domino was a Houston hedge fund widow who managed $200 million of inherited mineral money. She saw the 40-second clip of him smirking while Spencer called his sister a trash picker, forwarded it to father with the subject line, "Effective immediately," and pulled every penny. Within 10 days, 3 more legacy clients followed. Old Dallas money moves quietly, but it moves decisively. By mid-February, the office was bleeding 8 figures a quarter. Father called Weston into the corner office on a Wednesday morning and handed him a banker's box. Security walked him out before lunch. His severance wouldn't cover the lease on the Range Rover. Spencer vanished even faster. The ring was off by Valentine's Day. By March, she was on a 95-foot yacht in St. Bart's wearing nothing but a diamond choker and the arm of a 39-year-old crypto founder worth 5 times the entire Fairmont net worth. She posted a single black square on Instagram with the caption, "Turning the page." The comments were brutal. She disabled them and hasn't set foot in Highland Park since. Father and mother became social lepers overnight. Tuesday lunches at the country club stopped happening. Tables that used to be saved for them were suddenly reserved for a private party. Invitations to the Cattle Barons Ball, the Crystal Charity Gala, even the Idlewild debutante party simply never arrived. Mother tried to show up to one junior league meeting and discovered her name had been quietly removed from the roster. Father started taking his bourbon in the study at 3 in the afternoon, staring at the same Forbes cover he once used to prop open a window. I flew back to Dallas exactly once on a gray Tuesday in late March. Gulfstream G650, no filing, no press, in and out in under 5 hours. I drove myself from Love Field in a black Suburban with New York plates. I used the same brass key I'd had since I was 12 and walked straight into the marble foyer. Grandma Ellie was waiting under the chandelier with 2 small vintage Louis Vuitton suitcases already packed and zipped. She wore her camel hair coat, the single strand of pearls, and a smile that could light the entire state. We never went upstairs. We never looked for anyone else. The housekeeper carried the bags. Father appeared at the top of the staircase in a bathrobe, 2 sizes too big, face the color of ash mouth, working soundlessly. Mother hovered behind him, clutching a crumpled Kleenex like a life raft. Weston wasn't even home. Probably at some bar trying to explain why his Amex was declined. I looked up once. "This is what resignation looks like," I said. Grandma Ellie squeezed my arm. We turned and walked out. The heavy front door closed behind us with the soft finality of a bank vault. The drive to the airport took 19 minutes. She held my hand the entire way and didn't speak until we were climbing out over Oklahoma. "I always knew you'd come back for me one day," she said quietly. "I never left you," I answered. We transferred straight from Love Field to Teterboro, then helicoptered to the roof of my Brooklyn penthouse. Her new bedroom faces south, so sunrise paints the Statue of Liberty gold across her windows every morning. That same week, I blocked every Texas number: Father, Mother, Weston, the main house, the club, the family office, even the gardener who still had my old cell from high school. Emails, Instagram, LinkedIn, everything routed straight to trash without notification. Legal receives the occasional certified letter and shreds it unopened. There hasn't been a single text, voicemail, email, or carrier pigeon from the state of Texas since the day we left. Grandma Ellie and I have brunch on the terrace every Sunday. She still takes Earl Grey with a cloud of milk. I drink espresso. We read the weekend papers together and laugh at analysts trying to predict my next move. Some mornings she asks to see the new samples. She runs her fingers over the reclaimed cashmere like she's reading Braille, and smiles the same smile she gave me when I was 17 and terrified. The rest of the Fairmonts can keep their oil, their empty tables, their country club exile. I kept the only family member who ever truly chose me. Some blood is thinner than water and far more poisonous. Real success isn't the 9 billion on paper, the covers, the waiting lists, or the red carpet screams. Real success is waking up every morning and not needing a single person who spent a decade trying to bury you to suddenly applaud. I learned the difference between family and relatives the hard way. Relatives share DNA and dinner tables. Family shares belief when there is zero proof to believe in. For 11 years, I built an empire in silence because the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally used every chance they had to drag me through the mud. They mocked the scraps I turned into gold. They laughed at the dream they couldn't see. They made my ambition the punchline at every holiday. I don't hate them. Hate would mean they still have space in my head. I simply removed them the way a surgeon removes cancer completely cleanly without hesitation. Today, my world is smaller and infinitely richer. There are 2 toothbrushes in the master bath, 2 rocking chairs on the terrace, 1 woman who never once asked for a single thing except that I become exactly who I was meant to be. Grandma Ellie sits beside me every evening watching the sun sink behind Manhattan, sipping Earl Grey with a cloud of milk while I sketch next season's collection on the table between us. She still runs her fingers over the reclaimed fabrics like she's reading tomorrow. She still smiles the same smile she gave me when I was 17, and terrified and had nothing but $800 and a suitcase. That smile is worth more than every oil well in Texas combined. Some people are born into families. I chose mine. And I chose the only one who ever chose me back. Texas can keep their oil, their country clubs, their empty traditions, and their poisoned blood. I kept my freedom, my billions, and the one person whose love never came with conditions. Texas can keep their oil. I kept my freedom and the only family I ever needed.